The funeral home with the family name on the sign, the one a town has trusted for 3 generations, might not belong to that family anymore. Because across America, a single corporation quietly owns more than 1,500 funeral homes, and most of them still operate under the old local names. The families walking through those doors have no idea they are negotiating with a Houston-based giant during the worst week of their lives. And that is exactly how the company wants it. This is the story of how the American funeral industry turned grief into a $20 billion business, and how ordinary families can fight back. Start with the moment every family eventually faces, because it is the moment the entire industry is built around. Someone dies, and within hours, the people who loved them have to become customers. They are exhausted, they are heartbroken, and they have roughly 72 hours to make a dozen financial decisions worth thousands of dollars. There is no time to comparison shop, no energy to negotiate, and no emotional room to say the word no. Every other industry in America has to fight for its customers, but this one gets them delivered by fate itself. Economists have a name for this situation, and it is called a distressed purchase. The single weakest position a buyer can ever be in. Therefore, the funeral industry became one of the few businesses in the country where the customer almost never shops around. Surveys consistently show that most American families call exactly one funeral home, the one their family has always used, and accept whatever price they are quoted. But here is where the story takes its first dark turn. Because the funeral home their family has always used may no longer be what they think it is. In 1962, a Texas businessman named Robert Waltrip had an idea that would quietly reshape death in America. He realized that funeral homes were fragmented, family-owned, and enormously profitable, which made them perfect targets for corporate consolidation. So his company, Service Corporation International, began buying up beloved local funeral homes across the United States, one grieving town at a time. But Waltrip understood something crucial about the psychology of death, something that would become the industry's most powerful trick. People do not choose a funeral home the way they choose a restaurant, because they choose it the way they choose a church. They go where their parents went, where their grandparents went, where the director knew their family by name. Therefore, when SCI bought a funeral home, it almost never changed the name on the sign. The Johnson Family Funeral Home stayed the Johnson Family Funeral Home, even after the Johnsons were long gone. Today, Service Corporation International owns well over 1,500 funeral homes and hundreds of cemeteries across more than 40 states. It operates brands most Americans have seen without recognizing, names like Dignity Memorial and the Neptune Society. And it is not alone, because chains like Carriage Services and private equity-backed Foundation Partners Group have been buying up independents at a steady clip. Roughly 1 in 5 American funeral homes now answers to a corporate headquarters, and in many major cities, the share is far higher. But if corporate ownership simply meant efficiency and lower prices, this would be a boring story about business consolidation. It is not a boring story because the prices went the opposite direction. A Bloomberg Businessweek investigation found that, despite lower overhead, SCI charged an average of 42% more than independent funeral homes for a traditional funeral. Academic research has found corporate chains charging anywhere from 47 to 72% more than independents for comparable services. Read that again slowly, because it is the whole scandal in a single sentence. The same casket, the same hearse, the same chapel, sometimes even the same staff, at nearly double the price. Families are not paying for better service because they are paying for a brand they do not even know they are buying. They walk in trusting a local name, and they walk out having paid a corporate premium to a company they have never heard of. So how does the money actually get extracted, dollar by dollar, from a grieving family? The answer starts with a shiny box, because the casket is the crown jewel of funeral industry profit. An 18-gauge steel casket, the most common model sold in America, typically costs a funeral home somewhere between $350 and $600 wholesale. That same casket sits in the showroom, with a price tag of $1,500 to $3,000. That is a markup of 200 to 400%. And on premium models, the markups climb even higher. Some caskets that wholesale for $600 retail for $3,000, a 500% increase on a product the buyer will see for a few hours. But the markup is only half the game. because the showroom itself is designed like a psychological trap. Funeral homes typically display their most expensive caskets first, front and center, polished under warm lighting. The budget models are often tucked in a back corner, shown in unflattering colors, or left out of the room entirely. Industry research shows that the average casket shopper buys one of the first 3 models they are shown, usually the middle-priced one. Therefore, the funeral home controls the sale simply by controlling which 3 caskets a family sees first. A grieving son standing in that showroom is not comparing steel gauges, because he is asking himself a very different question. He is asking whether his mother deserves the nice one, and the entire room is built to make sure the answer feels like yes. Then comes the upsell script, and it is delivered so gently that most families never realize it is a script at all. Would the family like the protective casket with the rubber gasket seal to shield their loved one from the elements? It sounds like love, but sealed caskets do nothing meaningful to preserve remains, and the seal itself can cost hundreds of dollars extra. Would the family prefer embalming so their loved one looks peaceful for the viewing? Here is what many families are never clearly told, because no state in America requires embalming as a general rule. Refrigeration is an accepted alternative everywhere, and embalming is typically only relevant when there is a public viewing or a long delay. Yet embalming averages around $775, and it gets folded into packages as if it were mandatory. Then there is the vault, the concrete box the casket goes into, which no state law anywhere requires. Most cemeteries demand one anyway, to keep the ground from settling. And that policy conveniently adds another $1,000 or more to the bill. And hiding underneath everything sits the strangest fee in American commerce, the non-declinable basic services fee. This is a charge, often running into the thousands, that every family must pay no matter what they choose. A family could decline the viewing, decline the casket, decline the ceremony, and decline the flowers, but they cannot decline this fee. One analysis by the Funeral Consumers Alliance found this fee averaged 27% higher at corporate-owned funeral homes than at independents in the same cities. Consumer advocates have argued for years that it functions as a profit center wearing an overhead costume. The small fees pile up too, quietly, the way they always do. Some funeral homes charge $200 to obtain a death certificate that costs the state around $25. There are coordination fees, mileage fees, and cash advance markups on flowers and obituaries that families never think to question. By the time the paperwork is signed, the median American funeral, with burial, runs between $8,000 and $10,000. For millions of working families, that is the price of a used car, due in full during the worst week of their lives. Some families drain savings accounts, some max out credit cards, and some launch online fundraisers just to bury their parents. Grief becomes debt, and debt becomes a second grief that follows the family for years. Now here is the part of the story the industry would prefer stayed buried, because families have far more power than they realize. In 1984, after years of documented abuses, the Federal Trade Commission enacted something called the Funeral Rule. It is one of the most consumer-friendly regulations in American law, and almost nobody has ever heard of it. Under the Funeral Rule, every funeral home must hand over an itemized general price list to anyone who asks in person. They must give prices over the phone to anyone who calls, which means families can comparison shop without ever leaving the couch. Families have the legal right to buy only the individual services they want, and no funeral home can force a bundled package on them. They must show a written casket price list before showing the actual caskets, which diffuses the showroom trap. And here is the provision that terrifies the industry most of all. Every funeral home in America must accept a casket the family bought somewhere else, and they cannot charge a single dollar in handling fees for it. That means a family can buy a casket online from a warehouse retailer or from an independent seller for a fraction of the showroom price. The exact same steel casket marked up to $3,000 in the showroom can often be delivered for under $1,000. The funeral home must accept it, use it, and say nothing about it because federal law says so. Violations can cost funeral homes tens of thousands of dollars per offense, and the FTC runs undercover inspections to catch them. But a law only protects the people who know it exists. and the industry has never been eager to advertise it. There is one more shift happening, and it is shaking the entire business model to its foundation. Americans are walking away from the traditional funeral, and they are doing it fast. Cremation has overtaken burial as the American default, and the cremation rate is projected to reach roughly 2/3 of all deaths by the end of this decade. A direct cremation can cost around $2,000, compared to well over $8,000 for a traditional burial. Therefore, the industry's most profitable products, the caskets, the vaults, the embalming, and the elaborate viewings, are slowly losing their customer base. The corporations have responded by buying up cremation brands and building premium cremation packages loaded with the same familiar add-ons. The product changed, but the playbook did not. So what should an American family actually do with all of this information? The single most powerful move is also the simplest one, and it costs nothing. Talk about death before it happens, around the kitchen table, while everyone is calm and nobody is grieving. A family that knows what their parents actually want cannot be upsold on what a stranger says their parents deserve. The second move is to find out who really owns the local funeral home, because the answer is often hiding in plain sight. Scroll to the bottom of the funeral home's website and look for fine print mentioning a parent company like Service Corporation International or Dignity Memorial. If the ownership is not clear, call and ask directly, because an honest answer to that one question can save thousands. The third move is to use the telephone like a weapon, because the funeral rule makes price shopping a federal right. Calling 3 funeral homes for itemized prices takes 20 minutes and routinely reveals price differences of thousands of dollars for identical services. The fourth move is to remember that the casket showroom is optional, because the internet sells the same boxes without the 400% markup. And the fifth move is to know the magic words, because nothing in that building is mandatory except the basic services fee. No required embalming, no required package, no required vault by law, and no required guilt. None of this is about spending less on someone who was loved, because love was never the thing being measured. A $12,000 funeral does not contain more love than a $2,000 one. And every funeral director privately knows it. The industry's greatest trick was convincing grieving families that the price tag was a tribute. It never was. The tribute is the people in the room, the stories they tell, and the life that made them show up. Everything else is just a box with a markup. So before that phone call ever comes, every family in America should learn one name and one rule. The name is the corporation that might be hiding behind the local sign. And the rule is the federal law that says grief does not have to come with a corporate invoice. Because the funeral home with the family name on the sign might not belong to that family anymore, but the funeral still belongs to yours.